Imagine you just won the lottery, not a small prize, the big one. Hundreds of millions of dollars, your face on the news, your phone exploding with messages from people you haven't spoken to in years. You quit your job. You buy the house, you buy the car, you buy the other car. For a few months, life feels like a movie. Then something strange starts to happen. And by the time you notice it, it's already too late. Most people assume that money solves problems. That's the deal, right? You don't have enough money? You have problems. You get enough money, the problems disappear. But the data tells a completely different story. A story that starts not in a casino or a lottery office, but deep inside the oldest part of your brain. Your brain was not built for sudden wealth. It was built for survival on the African savanna, where resources were scarce, unpredictable, and fought over. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, spent decades studying how humans make financial decisions. What he found was uncomfortable. Your brain doesn't evaluate money in absolute terms. It evaluates money relative to what it's used to, and that single fact changes everything. There's a concept called hedonic adaptation. It was first described in detail by researchers Philip Brickman and Donald Campbell in their landmark 1978 study, and what they discovered shocked the academic world. They compared the happiness levels of lottery winners against the happiness levels of people who had recently become paralyzed in accidents. Within a year, both groups reported nearly identical levels of happiness. The lottery winners were no happier than before. The accident survivors were no more miserable. Your brain resets, always. No matter what happens to you, it finds a new normal and treats that as the baseline. So when you win the lottery, your brain doesn't experience permanent joy. It experiences a spike, a rush, a flood of dopamine that feels exactly like what you imagined it would feel. But dopamine is not a happiness chemical. Dopamine is an anticipation chemical. It fires when you expect a reward, not when you have one. The moment the reward is in your hands, the dopamine drops, and your brain immediately starts looking for the next thing. This is why lottery winners report buying bigger houses, faster cars, more expensive meals, and still feeling vaguely empty. Not because they're ungrateful, not because they're broken, because your brain raised the floor. What once felt like luxury now feels like normal, and normal doesn't trigger dopamine. Normal is invisible to your reward system, but it gets stranger, much stranger. Researcher H. Roy Kaplan conducted one of the most thorough studies of lottery winners ever completed, interviewing dozens of jackpot winners years after their wins. The pattern he found was consistent and disturbing. Many winners described their relationships collapsing. Friends who felt entitled to money they didn't receive. Family members who became hostile when gifts dried up. Strangers who appeared from nowhere with business ideas and sob stories. The social fabric that once surrounded these people began to rot from the outside in. Your brain is a social organ. It evolved to function inside a tribe. Status within that tribe, trust within that tribe, belonging within that tribe, these things matter to your nervous system more than any amount of money. When sudden wealth disrupts those relationships, your brain registers it as a survival threat. Not metaphorically, literally. The same neural pathways that fire when you're excluded from a group, when you're betrayed by someone close to you, when you feel fundamentally alone, those same pathways activate. And no amount of money can soothe them, because money was never the thing those pathways were designed to respond to. There's also the problem of competence. You don't know what you don't know. Most people who come into sudden wealth have no framework for managing it. And wealth without structure is not an asset, it's a pressure system. Studies from the National Endowment for Financial Education estimate that a significant portion of lottery winners, professional athletes, and inheritance recipients exhaust their windfalls within a few years. Not because they're stupid, because managing large sums of money is a skill, and skills take time to build. You can't download competence. Your brain learns by doing, by failing, by adjusting. Drop someone into the deep end of financial complexity without that foundation, and the outcome is almost always the same. Now think about this carefully. Why do you want to be rich? Take a moment. Really think about it. If you trace the want back far enough, past the cars and the houses and the freedom, what you usually find is something much simpler. Security, control, the ability to stop feeling afraid. Those are the real targets. And here is the devastating irony at the center of the lottery story. Sudden, unearned wealth often destroys exactly the things it promised to deliver. It creates new threats where there were none. It amplifies anxiety instead of reducing it. It replaces familiar problems with unfamiliar ones that your brain has no prior experience solving. Psychologist Tim Kasser spent years researching the relationship between financial goals and well-being. His findings, published across multiple studies and summarized in his book, The High Price of Materialism, showed that people who prioritize extrinsic goals, money, status, appearance, consistently report lower levels of well-being, more anxiety, and less satisfaction than people who prioritize intrinsic goals like relationships, personal growth, and contribution. The pursuit of wealth, when it becomes the primary goal, actually undermines the psychological conditions that make humans flourish. This is not an argument against money. Money matters enormously. Poverty causes measurable psychological damage. Financial stress is one of the leading drivers of relationship breakdown, poor health outcomes, and shortened lifespans. Having enough money is genuinely important. But enough is a threshold, not a ladder. Once your basic needs are met, once you have stability and safety and a few degrees of freedom, additional money produces diminishing returns on happiness. The research on this point is robust and consistent. So why does the lottery fantasy persist? Why does almost every human alive, at some point, imagine what they would do with unlimited money? Because your brain is running a very old program. A program written on the savannah where more resources meant more survival. Where the person with the most food, the most tools, the most territory was the person most likely to live through the year. That program doesn't update itself. It doesn't read the research. It just keeps running, generation after generation, promising that enough will finally feel like enough. It won't. And that's not a tragedy. That's just the operating system. The most financially content people on Earth are not the ones who won the most. They're the ones who learned to work with their brain instead of against it, who built wealth slowly in alignment with their values, through systems they understood and controlled, who measured their lives not against some imagined future of infinite abundance, but against something far more ancient and far more satisfying. Contribution, connection, competence, the feeling of building something that matters. The real reason winning the lottery makes you poorer has nothing to do with taxes or bad investments or greedy relatives, though all of those play a role. It's because wealth without growth is just noise, and your brain, the same brain that survived ice ages and predators and famine, was never designed to be satisfied by noise. Tonight, somewhere in the world, someone is buying a lottery ticket. They're imagining the life on the other side of those numbers. And that imagination, that pure electric flash of possibility, is producing more dopamine in their brain than winning ever will. The ticket was never the point. The dream was.